Thank you for joining today's webinar where we'll be discussing how to deliver a better customer experience with the introduction of self-service. Your host today is Patrick Bolger. Patrick is Chief Evangelist at Hornbill Service Management. He works closely with customers, industry associations and IT luminaries to communicate the opportunities associated with service excellence. Also, we're very fortunate to be joined by Payton of IDBS and Phil Hurcom of Knight Frank, who will share with you the benefits they've received from the successful implementation of self-service. Before we start, I'll cover a few general housekeeping items so you can participate in today's event. On screen is an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface. On the left is the viewer window. The upper right-hand corner is the control panel. Clicking the arrows opens and closes the control panel. The audio pane gives you the option to listen to the webinar via computer speakers or via the telephone. The questions pane gives you the ability to send questions to the presenters during the presentation. Simply type in your questions and press send. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session to answer as many questions as we have time for. Thank you for taking the time to attend, and I will now pass you over to Patrick.
Well, hi there, everybody. We're going to talk today about self-service, and I've seen a massive drive to actually adopt self-service. I think it's largely down to the fact that a lot of organizations these days are struggling. They can't throw IT people at problems anymore, and they've got to find better ways of doing things. So self-service is an obvious area for organizations to look at. Why would you want to use self-service? Well, the first one is actually identifying the low-value contacts. And what I mean by that is contacts that the customers may make with you that they just want an answer to something. They don't really need to talk to someone. They just want an answer to their query, an update on the status of the call. And basically using technology to deliver that service to the customer. And by doing that, you just reduce the demand you have on your frontline service desk staff and also the cost of providing that service. And as we'll see later on as we get through this presentation, one of the major benefits is actually taking that load away from the service desk so you can focus on delivering those higher value services and extending service hours. So customers can have this stuff available to them 24/7, even if no one is actually managing the desk. But you're offering the customer a choice. So it's not call the service desk and nothing else. It's call the service desk or submit your stuff by email or use the self-service portal. So all in all, it tends to be an increase in customer satisfaction. And the example on the right-hand side, the image I'm showing you, is just one of the earliest examples in my memory. I'm sure there are others, but just basically being able to get some money out from the bank. So if I visit the bank, I may want to talk to one of the advisors about a mortgage or something, and that's fine. I need that interaction at that level. But just to withdraw some of my cash, I don't particularly want to have to wait in line. I would prefer to get my service just in this automated fashion. And as we've gone on, I mean, here's an example of some of the other things that the bank have said, you know what, this stuff works, and there are other things that we can add to it. So topping up your mobile phone. Ordering some of your account services, so maybe I need a new paying in book or something along those lines, and you just add to these services as you go along. And self-service is no different. I notice return card is there, so they probably decided to add that after, like me, I had my cards gobbled up on a number of occasions and no way of getting them back. So customer feedback is important as we go through these self-service adoption cycles. So as a modern consumer, we were just having a chat before the webinar began with Adam and Phil, and we were just saying how much of our lives we now actually live online, how much of the transactions we do as modern consumers. So ordering stuff from Amazon, everyone's done that. Selecting my flights when I want to go on holiday somewhere or going away on business, I'll do all of that online. Banking. All of my banking these days, I rarely have to go into my bank, and even things like taxing my car or paying some of my bills online, that's all done via the web these days. Even downloading my apps. So if I'm on the Mac App Store and I want Keynote or something like that, I can do the whole transaction. I don't actually need to speak to someone. So modern business has seen the benefits of adopting this self-service approach. And it's strange that within IT, we don't see that benefit. We don't see the same level of automation happening. The importance of self-service, again, just to give you a classic example, now not only can I actually book my flight online and select it online, but when I go to the airport, self-service is really in further adoption there. So I go to a kiosk to actually check in for my flight. I can carry things around like TripIt on my iPhone. I can actually use QR codes now to scan in. So I don't even need a boarding pass. My QR code's presented, and I'll just scan it on the scanner when I arrive at the airport. And even when I get off at the other side, I can book my taxi and other bits and pieces online. So mobility is really driving the use of these self-service components, and I think we'll see an increasing number of mobile apps for this type of service as we go forward. So as I mentioned, so why is it when I'm at home I can do all these things, but yet in the office, rarely do I have options for self-service? Some organizations do adopt it, but in the main, I believe the industry stat is somewhere around 5% in general terms actually adopt self-service, or 5% of calls are processed via self-service, to be more correct. So some of the realities, there was a white paper commissioned by the Service Desk Institute in the earlier part of this year, and some of the conclusions that came from that is that actually in most instances the initiative to implement self-service is driven by IT, it's not driven by the customer. I suppose the customer has adopted the approach of, well, we've always called the service desk when we got a problem. There are certain things, as I mentioned, that we can deliver by self-service and deliver a better customer experience. So what are the drivers? If IT is implementing it, it's largely to reduce the cost of providing the service and to make your staff more effective and provide that extended support, that 24/7 support. The issues for self-service adoption are people are saying, well, we don't have the time or the resources to do it. Nobody within IT actually owns this. The processes are relatively immature, so you don't have procedures formalized. And also, if we don't keep the knowledge up to date, well, then people will stop using it. And self-service in its own right won't necessarily work unless you've got integration with the support tools. People can actually check the status of their calls. They can provide updates. They can add file attachments. And largely, people are not using metrics to track how well self-service is used. But as we've seen the benefits, we mentioned them already, the majority of adopters, their customers report positive experience with self-service. They also say that actually the morale of the IT staff gets boosted, and we'll hear from a couple of our customers later on sharing their experiences of what difference it made to their service desk to be able to use this self-service component. So we seem to have a very solid business case for adoption of self-service. So Gartner is saying up to 40% of all service desk contacts by volume could be handled through self-service, but only 5% currently go by that route. And what they're also saying is an IT organization that takes 30,000 contacts a year and can drive 20% of those through self-service will see savings of between $300,000 and $400,000 annually. So that's a pretty solid business case for adoption of self-service. So why isn't it happening? Well, in that same piece of research, Gartner brought out some myths surrounding adoption of self-service. And the first one was basically that IT self-service reduces costs. And I think invariably, yes, it absolutely does. But it won't reduce your costs across the board. You have to know where you're going to use it. So it says in the report, IT will reduce level 1 support. And to an extent it will. But I think level 0, the type of stuff that shouldn't really be coming through the service desk at all, that's an area that's real low-hanging fruit for implementing a self-service solution. The second myth is that it is a one-time investment, so you implement it and that's it. And I would agree wholeheartedly with the reality here that it does require constant care and feedback and basically keeping it up to date, making sure that it's being properly used and reinforcing why people should be using it. Again, Phil from Knight Frank will give you his experiences with that. Myth 3, end users will flock to self-service, so if you build it, they'll come. And that's not entirely true. Just because it's available, I may elect as a customer to use it out of hours, but I may prefer to actually speak to someone when the service desk is available. So end user acceptance will vary dramatically. But again, it's one of these things you can't just leave up to the end user. You've got to educate them, and you've got to market the benefits of actually using a self-service solution. The fourth myth is self-service is easy to implement. Well, I would say yes, it is. If you're using a decent service desk tool and you got all the processes of that support self-service built into the tool, then that's a leader for success. So basically, you're pretty assured that if you've got all of those things joined up, self-service will be something that works if you've done all the other things right. Okay, so where can it really help? So just collecting data from the customer. So it may be symptoms for an incident, but it may also be service requests. So someone will say, I need this piece of kit. So you can actually use some pretty clever data collection techniques to make sure that the information you request is relevant for a given service. And then providing information to the customer. So if I'm about to update a service, letting the customer know, posting it on the self-service page, and basically saying at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, service A is not going to be available for 1 hour. That's an easy way of at least advising the customer that you're proactive with these things. Allowing them to track the progress of their own request. So if they submit something, just removing that need to call the service desk to see what's happening. That's pretty useful, and viewing the history of their requests. Obvious low-hanging fruit, things like password reset. So if I've forgotten my password, there's an easy way to actually do that. Technology exists, and it is a real no-brainer to implement this type of thing when you understand how many requests get processed for I've forgotten my password. Also for presenting basic information to help customers diagnose problems or to help them actually through a process. So just offering them that access to knowledge when the service desk may not be manned, and also just providing hints and tips. So before you actually log an incident, try this, try that, and do the obvious stuff. And then setting expectations around request fulfillment. So explaining to the customer what the process is for ordering new equipment, for processing a new hire, and allowing those tasks to be automated, and people advise that they need to do something to fulfill that particular request, and in addition then authorization. So if I want a new laptop, that's fine, I can submit my request, but my business unit manager is probably going to have to say, yes, it's okay for you to spend that money. So again, all of that can be processed and automated through a self-service interface. So this is just an example of a self-service interface. This is Supportworks, and you can see here this only doesn't track the IT services. We also have other services like HR services. We could have facility services in there. So if air conditioning's broken in our part of the building, then perhaps I can actually log that via self-service portal rather than having to phone the facility service desk. But once we've done that, creating that visibility for the customer, allowing them to see what's happening with their service request. This just shows you sourcing items for a new hire. So that process of actually onboarding a new employee and showing where we are in the process stages. That really helps the customer and sets the expectation as to when things will be delivered. Right, so I mentioned this already. This is just a configuration example for one of our US customers, and they implemented self-service here. What they did was they actually plugged in to some of the content delivered straight from their supplier's website. So in effect, if someone says, I want a Verizon phone, they then got asked some questions about that Verizon phone. So just drag them through a self-service wizard that says, how many messages do you need? What kind of call plan do you need? Once you've done all of that and you've processed all of that information, you have everything you need to process the request, and the customer can actually check and see what's going on with that request via self-service. Very simple, very straightforward, and reduces demand on the service desk quite phenomenally. Okay, password reset. I won't spend a huge amount of time on this, but just some basic stats. Gartner is saying that anywhere between 20 and 50% of service desk calls can be for password reset. 50% sounds high to me. I suggest they've got another problem there rather than just people forgetting their password. But they're saying average cost for a single password reset could be as high as $100. And again, that sounds high to me, but independent research says anywhere between $25 and $147. Time taken to resolve, anywhere between 30 minutes to several days. And you can imagine what that does in terms of user frustration and lost productivity. The requirement to have a password reset is 24/7. So just basically taking that, the business case for the cost to you, the amount of time taken to resolve that, and the frustration and lost productivity, it really is a no-brainer to just basically have a customer be able to log in via any portal or just do Control-Alt-Delete and basically process it from there and have their password reset, again, just removing all of that demand on the service desk. Really simple, really easy to do. All of these things may not seem like massive pieces of work in their own right. If you're doing this day in, day out, so resetting passwords several times, answering the phone, say what's happening with a service request, all of those little pieces of work, they soon add up to costing you a fortune. So if you can automate those, you're just delivering massive savings by automating these tasks that are repetitive and really need to be handled by the service desk. Knowledge management is an area that people often look to make self-service more effective. And I think people really miss the trick with knowledge management in that they expect the technology to make a difference. And I like this definition here. It's saying it's a discipline of enabling individuals, teams, and entire organizations to collectively, systematically capture, store, create, and apply knowledge to better achieve their objectives. The fact is, this is talking about enabling individuals, teams, and entire organizations. It's not talking about technology. This is something you need to institutionalize within your business to make it work. If you're going to do that, and probably the place to start would be identifying the areas where it's going to help you most. So what are our top 10 incidents, problems, changes, service requests? To create the knowledge, making sure that everyone's responsible for doing this. So you may have someone author it and change the knowledge as you go along. But if you look at things like wikis, they're a good example of how you can actually add collective knowledge to add value to a system and provide solutions for customers. If you're going to do that, rewarding analysts for actually inputting quality knowledge, that's a good way to actually encourage that behavior. Just telling people they need to do it won't necessarily deliver those rewards and deliver that input. You can store it anywhere, so it could be just an internal wiki. A knowledge management system is preferable. And basically, the discipline here is really just constantly redirecting people. I can tell you we implemented knowledge management at Hornbill a number of years ago, and it was a mission. People were asking the same question time and time again. It's very hard. And one of your colleagues says, does anyone know where I can get this or how I can do that? It's very hard to say, have you looked on the wiki, or is there a document for that, or have you looked at the knowledge management system? It's not until people start thinking, this is the first place I go to for that knowledge, where its use is actually institutionalized. When you get to that level, you know you cracked it. But you also have to look at reviewing that, so giving customers the opportunity to provide feedback, looking at some of your usage stats. And again, just a really quick example of how you might do this. This is showing knowledge management search from an analyst perspective. So we can say, how do I do this? In this case, it's just I can't open this PowerPoint presentation. Once you've done that, you'll get a relevance link to the various documents that may provide a resolution to your problem. You then get a description of the problem, some various solutions, and also some articles that may be related to that. And this is the critical part here, the ability for the customer to say, did this solve my problem? Was the article relevant? Would I like to know when this is updated? Is there any other feedback I want to provide? This is a crucial part. It may not get used, but on occasion, you'll find your IT staff are pretty good if they're incentivized to actually keep this knowledge up to speed. And looking at some of those feedback stats, so what are our most and least useful articles? Providing that type of analysis will give you a really good indication of what's working and what's not. So just to give you an insight into some customer successes, and then we'll get straight on to speaking with some people that have actually done this in reality and get the benefit of their experience. Sharp is one of our customers. This is not an internal service desk. This was a consumer service desk. So if you bought a video camera or a TV from Sharp and you had a problem with it, this is probably the first place you would have went to. So they had an ask a question facility. So basically, they dropped demand at the service desk with several thousand. I think there's about 6,000 or 7,000 inquiries per year were dealt with automatically. So customers saying, thank you, I've got my answer. Their volume of requests at the service desk dropped by 1/3. Their resolution times were reduced by half. So they cut their time to resolve a call in half. And as a result of that, they realized, actually, we got too many people focused on call handling, and a quarter of their staff are actually redirected from call handling to get on to resolution. As a result, they're providing a fantastic service, and customer satisfaction went up by 20% in that first year. So you'll see the comment here from Paul Copley, who's the Customer Information Center lead at Sharp, just basically saying they're actually maintaining a better level of service now with 25% fewer staff than they did last year. And this is due through basic self-service and use of a knowledge function. Right, so I'm going to take us on to our first of our customers here, and I'm going to introduce you to Adam Payton. Adam's the Customer Support Manager, IDBS, and Adam basically has been through this, but he has been leading an externally facing customer support desk. It is IT, but it's actually externally facing. So they provide service to customers, providing software solutions to customers, and self-service has been live there for about 2 years. It's been heavily customized to suit the needs of their business and their external customers. So I just wanted to bring Adam in and get Adam to, first of all, introduce himself.
Hi there. So as Pat said, thanks for the intro, Pat. My name's Adam. Some of you may have seen me before at various Hornbill events talking about some of the experiences that we've had with the Supportworks package. And one part of that is what we're here to talk about today, which is the web self-service element. It was actually a key reason for selecting Hornbill in the first place, was that it had this facility, and we decided to embrace it, and that's what we're going to look at today.
Okay, Adam. So your business is supporting external customers. So did IDBS decide to provide that service facility themselves, or was it actually driven by demand from your customers?
So it's interesting, because that was one of the points earlier on in the presentation, and I would say that it was actually a mix of both. There was pressure from the business to manage our resources in terms of support analysts, bearing in mind that we knew we were going to have more traffic coming through the team as we grew. So that was a significant aspect of deciding for self-service, but our customers were also asking to have the services that we could provide through a self-service website.
Okay, so what would you say are the main benefits that self-service is offering to your customers?
So again, a few of these have been touched on already. It's almost as if we've been talking before the presentation, Pat. But I'd say that the key benefits to us were very much in the knowledge management area. My team were dealing with very similar requests from all our different customers that we have globally. And prior to launching self-service, we had no way of reusing that information unless you knew where to look. Now we publish that via the Supportworks knowledge base into the self-service portal, and customers can find the information for themselves, and that's where we've gained our real true win from self-service. Okay,
so would you say that in the main that self-service is used for fairly repetitive and simple queries, the ones I was talking about earlier, or is it some of the more complex stuff as well?
I would say it's both. It's we have, of course, the simple "how do I do this" question. One example was we had 500 incidents of that same repeated question per year before we launched self-service. And after we launched self-service, publishing that "how do I" question, that went down to being received about 10 times into support. But we do publish complex knowledge-based articles, which even includes multimedia movie content for showing people how to use our software.
Right, that's interesting. I think there's going to be a big rise in the coming years. The stuff I've spoken about on other webinars, but in the use of video, I think that's really going to take off in the coming years, because people just learn far more. I know myself, if I had the choice of reading a document on how to do something or looking at a video on YouTube, it'll be YouTube every time. What about the broadcasting of information out to your customers? So if you've got like product or service updates, do you use self-service for that? And if you do, does it work well?
Yeah, indeed we do. We use the hot and known issues facility within Supportworks to publish bulletins, notifications to our customers directly on the homepage of self-service, and we've just recently backed that up by using the bulk email functionality from within Supportworks to also send to a designated contact list, pointing them to those announcements.
Ah, well, okay. What about benefit within your own support operation? So obviously the customers are getting benefit from doing this. How has it made a difference to the support you're providing internally?
Well, if you like, the sort of holy grail number, the most important one that my management like to see is return on investment, et cetera, et cetera. And interestingly enough, during 2010, we actually handled the same number of, if you like, incidents via our knowledge self-help facility as we did via the actual physical support analysts taking calls and answering emails.
Wow, so you're talking about kind of the same volume of inquiries through knowledge-based self-service as your analysts, yeah?
That's exactly right, Pat. So one could say it's 100% increase in the amount of volume of calls that we can handle, but using exactly the same number of headcount within the team.
So, right, you'd have had to double the number of resource you had to handle that same volume of calls. In terms of analysis of the volume of calls, do you have any kind of high-level figures of the stuff that you're now managing to do through self-service?
So there's a few key metrics that we measure within self-service. Of course, we measure the volume of calls that are logged by the customers themselves. And we also implemented a series of metrics that would track the use of the knowledge base, which articles are the most popular, as you've alluded to, Pat, the top 10 most useful articles, etc. But monitoring what actually happens from our customer's perspective is hugely important, because otherwise you don't know you're giving them the right thing.
And what would you say, so you've managed to kind of achieve a relatively high level of customer adoption. So what you say was kind of the most critical aspects of that. So why are customers driven towards self-service as opposed to calling the service desk?
I think the key thing for us was that we knew our customers wanted to be able to access information and resources online. So what we wanted to do when we gave them self-service was that we gave them as much as we possibly could. The ability to view and update calls, the ability to access knowledge, the ability to download all of our documentation that's product related, even to the point where we now have our training courses offered online via self-service, and a customer can actually book for a training course if they wish.
Wow, okay, that's the way to do it. So does it surprise you? I mentioned a figure earlier on that Gartner came out with saying that as few as 5% of issues are actually handled by self-service for internal support environments. So does that surprise you first? And secondly, from an internal perspective, what do you think is stifling that adoption?
The number did surprise me when I first saw it. I thought it would be higher than that. It's funny, we have an internal support team at IDBS as well who manage our printers, our desktops, our Windows updates, etc. And they don't have a self-service facility. So actually off the back of this, I'm inclined to talk to our internal IT department and see whether they want to adopt self-service themselves.
You'll probably get your internal IT team stringing me up for this now. So because you come from a support organization that's setting up self-service for external customers, and we may have quite a few people on the phone that are in exactly that position. So what advice would you say you would give to these people in setting up their self-service components? What really should they focus on doing?
It's difficult to pin it down to one thing, but if I'd have to really point the two biggest or most important things for launching successful web self-service, they're actually things that you've already mentioned, Pat. But the first thing is make sure that it's not just one person doing all of this. Get buy-in from your entire team, because then you really make it happen. And the second thing is don't think it will just happen without putting any effort in. If you put the effort in, you'll get the returns, absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Adam. I really appreciate that. Some really solid advice there. So Adam's going to be sticking around with us until the end of this session. So if you guys in the audience do have any questions for Adam, raise them towards the end of our presentation, and we'll do our very best to ask them as we go through. What I'd now like to do is to introduce you to one of our other customers, and it's a guy called Phil Hurcom from an organization called Knight Frank. So Knight Frank, world's largest privately owned property agency, managing $700 billion of real estate. Welcome, Phil.
Hi, Pat, and hello, everyone else.
Okay, Phil, you come from a slightly different perspective, in that you're actually managing an internal service desk. And basically, this is, I'd say, probably the focus of the majority of the people who are on this call. So people are struggling to get adoption, and Gartner says that one of the main issues is that nobody owns it. So who at Knight Frank owns self-service?
So our group head of IT is responsible for driving the use of the product around our global organization and having it adopted as a sort of core strategic tool for the IT department. On a day-to-day sort of operational basis is our UK service desk manager.
Okay, so was self-service adoption actually driven by IT, or was it something the users themselves actually wanted?
Much like Adam, there was a bit of a mixture, I suppose, that we had an explicit requirement from our users who wanted to be able to check on updates on calls that they previously logged without having to phone back to the service desk. And we knew that was something we wanted to achieve within IT as well, and there was a sort of nice meeting of minds, I suppose. The reality was we ended up being much more successful than that actually in other areas, and probably less successful in the original requirement than we anticipated. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixture.
So apart from using self-service to get updates on call status, what else are your customers now using it for?
So all service requests have to be logged through self-service, so new user, new purchase, I want to change to this application, all that sort of stuff, to the extent that if somebody walks down and explains their requirements to somebody in our admin or service desk teams within our head office, they're then told what they need to do to go away and log it through self-service. Additionally, we strongly encourage people to log incidents through self-service. And our sort of, if you ring the service desk number, which is still published, you get a message which explains that if you're ringing to report that you can't access self-service, please hold. Otherwise, go away and use self-service.
Wonderful. I'm sure it's said in a much more polite fashion. Okay. So in terms of the user adoption, so I've often heard a statement that actually our users don't want this, they want to use the phone, they push back, they're not interested in us doing it. So did you get any pushback, or did your users just adopt it readily?
I mean, inevitably there's a split amongst the user community. I mean, some people love it and take to it like ducks to water. Some people will resist it till the sort of day they leave. In the main, people are happy to use it. They appreciate the benefits. They understand why it was introduced. It's been particularly easy to get the adoption around the service request side of things. So understanding those processes, as mentioned earlier, it's a very useful tool for gathering standard information on repeated processes. I mean, that's a bit of a no-brainer. We did have to invest more time in a sort of marketing and education campaign around using, it was getting incidents logged, and that's been slightly slower uptake. But we also had to spend a lot of time educating people that using self-service did not mean you were getting a worse level of service than if you were phoning us, and so making sure that message got through loud and clear was very important.
Right, okay, and I thought that the approach you took was really ingenious. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand what you did was initially when you introduced self-service, you mentioned you had some marketing, some education around that, and you let people know what they needed to do. But first of all, you started when service requests and incidents were coming in, you were saying, did you know that you could have logged this via self-service, followed within kind of 6 or 8 weeks by a slightly more forceful approach? Is there any reason why you have not logged this via self-service? And then finally, getting the people who still weren't using it and kind of showing them how they can get the best of it and what was in it for them. Is that fairly correct?
Yeah, that's almost exactly right. We did a soft launch where we introduced the functionality behind self-service. And so we had things like if somebody emailed our service desk email address, they would get a reply saying, oh, thanks for your email, we're dealing with it, but did you know you could have updated your call yourself through self-service or logged the new call through self-service? And similarly, when people rang, the voice message, the introduction message on the phone system I referred to earlier said something along the lines of, just to let you know we got new. And we use our intranet front page repeatedly to have new stories introduced in the system. We ran that for about a month or so, and then we sort of, tightened the screws a little bit, I suppose, and we were much more explicit about, you're now well self-service exists. Is there any reason why you haven't chosen to use it on this occasion? And people would come up with excuses, and we talk through the reasons why those weren't valid in our eyes. And then finally, when we came back from our Christmas closure about 3 years ago, we adopted the right. You should be using this now. And so when we were sort of asking the question, why haven't you used self-service? And again, people would come up with reasons, and our service desk analysts would take the time to remote control onto machines and show people this is where self-service is, this is how you could have used it on this example. So again, we did have to invest time and energy into that. We did have to, in effect, distract the service desk analysts from possibly what is a core function, but we thought in the longer run that would pay off.
Okay, so you had some stats here, and I'll just put them up for the people that are actually looking at the slides still and haven't fallen asleep. Supportworks, you deployed the entire service desk within 1 week, and that in itself is impressive. But after running the service for, what, 2 years, you're now at something like 75% of all incidents coming by self-service. Did you know just how far above the industry average that is?
I didn't, no, and I'm constantly surprised by it, but I guess it's one of the reasons why I keep sort of doing these things for yourselves. I mean, just to update those numbers, the 75% of all incidents, I got an update off our service desk manager this morning, over the last 3 months, yeah, I mean, it's 75%. Our response time on average has been 4 minutes. We're closing 32% of all tickets logged through self-service within 5 minutes. To give some idea of the scale, we're taking about 750 raising about 750 tickets a week in Supportworks. And on the telephone numbers, in the 3 months before we started launching self-service, we were taking on average 250 phone calls a day into the service desk. We now take 200 to 250 a week.
Wow. Okay. Very, very impressive. Why do you think that you've been able to manage to achieve and to maintain this level of user adoption? Was that easy? Is there stuff that you should do? Do people resist it or push back?
Fundamentally, we've been able to demonstrate that it's a good service and that there's no drop-off in the quality, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, we also take quite a lot of time to do things like customer surveys. I mean, we do that in general across all IT services, but there's there's a clear section on what people like and don't like about self-service. So we've been able to tweak what we offer in the light of customer feedback. We also, again, spend a lot of time standing in front of customer groups and standing agenda items on some of those is what can we do to improve self-service. So there's a constant sort of dialogue going on with our business to make sure that we're delivering what it is they want. And that's been very successful to the extent that we've had other departments, so our marketing department and one of our sort of building facilities management departments come to us and say, we want a similar solution, please. Can we sort of piggyback off IT self-service?
So what about specific benefits to IT? I mean, it's nice that other departments are beginning to see it, but we've got a figure up here of a 50%. And I'm not sure if that's right, a 50% reduction in call volumes. Is that right?
I think it's close to 80%. If my maths is right, over the last 3 months certainly, and that's fairly consistent with what we've experienced over the last 2.5 to 3 years. I mean, 3 years ago we had 8 first-line analysts on our service desk, all of whom were expected to be logged into our phone system, taking calls at any one time. Now we have 1 person logged into the phone system at any one time. We have 1 analyst who's dedicated to dealing with the incoming calls, reviewing them, making a decision about whether they can be retained by the service desk or passed on to other specialist teams, passed on to our admin team, etc. And what that's done is freed up the other sort of 5 to 6, depending on how many are in, just to focus on progressing calls, delivering solutions, resolving issues for users.
So I take it that this has made a huge difference to your ability to resolve calls and actually get things done now that people are able to focus on resolution rather than just logging.
That's right. I mean, they're individually and collectively they're more productive. They're getting through a greater volume of work. They're able to objectively prioritise calls. There's not this case of I'm on the phone to someone, I'm having to deal with your issue because I can't get you off the phone, but there might be 15 more important things backed up in the queue behind that. So we can take a step back and look at what's more important to our business to get fixed. And that also helps de-stress the team. They're not working in a call center environment anymore. And so they're able to spend time discussing problems, talking to each other, talking to the other specialist teams. And that's actually quite an important thing for us, that we want our service desk to be fixing as many calls as is possible. So it allows our more advanced senior technicians to focus on delivering projects and additional value to the firm. And so the fact that our service desk people, we work in a big open plan environment, they can go over and discuss with the exchange administrators or the people who know about our Citrix environment in a reasonable level of detail, how can they fix a problem, because they're not having to worry about getting back to answer the phones.
Right, so we have quite a large audience listening to this. So again, I would take it that people are tuning in because they want to know how to successfully adopt. So if you were joining a new organization or you just had to do self-service all over again, what advice would you give? What are the most crucial things you need to do to be successful?
I think you need to understand what your customers want, and so to make sure you deliver something that meets their requirements and their expectations. I think the very easy, quick wins for us was identifying the business processes that we could capture and on occasion improve using self-service. We needed to make the self-service interface as simple to use as possible. So we haven't done, and unlike Adam, as I understand it, we haven't done any real customization of the Supportworks self-service interface. We've branded it so it looks like it's part of our intranet, and we've made sure that within our intranet you're never more than one click away from accessing self-service. Users aren't given a username and password. It's one of the luxuries possibly of being an internal service desk than an external one, is that we can use our single sign-on capability just to make sure you click on it, bang, you're in, it knows who you are. An obvious example of that is on the incident management side of things, where, I mean, people will be familiar with Supportworks. You have you can drive people down the sort of operator scripts, wizards, etc., to try and capture information around incidents as you can do around service requests. We very quickly realized that's not what our customers wanted. They just want a box into which they can type some information. We knew we were leaving ourselves open to the occasional bit of gibberish arriving in our inbox, or excuse me, not in our inbox anymore, of course, straight into Supportworks, but in the vast majority of cases that's not been our experience. Users can quite adequately explain what their problem is in language that allows us to then progress their call without having to pick up the phone and go, can I just clarify what it was you meant by this? So those are probably the key things I would say.
Okay, fantastic. So if self-service truly worked, I mean, I was talking earlier on about knowledge management and the fact that it needs to be institutionalized and the struggle that we had to actually change the culture here at Hornbill. So if it's truly worked for you, then it will be the first place that people think of going to when they have an issue or when they need something. Is that actually the case?
For the vast majority of the people in our organisation, yes, I think it's true to say that is the case.
So I guess that's where you're getting 80% of your calls through self-service.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I don't, you'll still hear it today that people on our service desk are answering the phone going, "Oh right, is there any reason why you haven't logged this through self-service?" I mean, I think some of our analysts take a sort of perverse pride in having that discussion with some of our more recalcitrant users, and there's a sort of clash of wills going on there with some people who we know we will probably never persuade to use it. But that being said, we've reached a certain point. And we know we can't just draw a line in the sand and say, hurrah, we've got there, that new people are joining our organisation all the time. We need to make sure that the good messages we want to get across are reinforced. So we're always advertising the service. We're always making sure that people know how to use it, where to find it, what it's there for, what the benefits are. And so, yeah, we haven't finished. We probably never will. But, it's, to an extent, I suppose it's like painting the fourth bridge. But, in general, it's working very well.
Well, that's the sad thing about this whole cycle of continual improvement. You don't ever finish. You never get to the stage where you're actually really, really good. So, Phil, thank you very much. Phil's going to stick with us again until right at the end. I think I've only got a couple of more slides for you, so I won't bore you with the detail, but I'd like to point you at a couple of bits and pieces ago. I think it's come out very, very clearly from the advice Adam's given, the advice Phil's given, that really this is not about just making life easy on ourselves. That's a byproduct. But we have to learn to focus on the customer. What is it the customer wants? This is a guy I know and respect called Ian Payton. He's the author of the USMBOK, which stands for Universal Service Management Body of Knowledge. And Ian really is a pioneer for what he calls outside-in thinking. And effectively what he's saying is that we often waste a lot of money on service management initiatives by basically designing things that are complex and costly with massive implementation paths, and it's mainly because we fail to focus on the customer, on what the customer values in their service experience. Ian also runs a workshop he calls a service experience mapping. Now I think this is probably a bridge too far for a lot of you guys, but just to let you know that this type of feedback, this type of mechanism models exist for this. So in any service delivery mechanism, you'll have basically different phases of delivering the service. So you'll have a pre-transaction phase, so where I'm first interfacing with the service provider, then the actual transaction phase itself, and then the post-transaction phase. There are certain things that I see as a consumer, as a user of those services, and those basically are the things that go on. You'll see it there about just midway down in the first part of this graphic. It says it's the line of visibility. This is what the customer sees. This is the stuff that's visible to them. So they're only really concerned with what happens above that line and how quickly things get done behind that line. So there is actually different levels of satisfaction. So I may be completely satisfied on placing the order, but not satisfied with the communication I'm receiving, and then get my goods delivered on time, and overall my experience will vary. There are ways that you can do this. There's a link down to the bottom where Ian is running some of his service design, service experience design workshops. He also has an online university where he teaches this stuff, servicemanagement101.com. And I'm not really trying to sell Ian stuff, but I just think that an outside-in approach and looking what the customer value most, that's the key to successful service management and self-service in general. So my advice to you guys will be maintain that focus on the customer, but when I see things done incredibly well, I mean, Adam talked about how they customized our Supportworks self-service to deliver an interface that really, really fits the business need. But Phil is talking about 80% of service requests coming via and incidents coming via self-service, and they haven't done anything except actually dealt with the cultural thing, driven the initiative, and institutionalized the use. So back to basics, you don't really need massively comprehensive supporting technology to do this. You just need to drive the commitment and the culture to be able to actually deliver it. So that's the closing piece of advice I give to you. So we now, on the right-hand side, guys, we've got a questions pane, and we're quite happy to take questions from anyone in the audience. So if you just basically submit your question there, if you want to direct them specifically to one of the guys there, just let me know, and I'll quite happily try and get those questions addressed as we go through. So actually, we've got quite a few coming in already. Let's see. Let's take the first one from Amardip Gill. So what recommendations do you have, Phil, for marketing self-service to internal customers and staff on a continual basis? Initial take-up and adoption was good, but still recently the users still prefer to call the service desk.
So we regularly have stories on our front page of our intranet, which is a sort of enforced homepage for all our users, extolling the virtues of self-service. As I said earlier, we have some banner ads throughout our corporate intranet, one of which is always self-service, so it's right in front of people. We also attend a number of user forums, probably the most important one of which is our induction day where all new starters to the firm turn up to head office and they get a series of presentations from the chief executive down to the accounts department, not down to the accounts and the accounts department. And so the number of support teams like accounts, marketing, etc. stand up, have a series of slides introducing people and telling you who they are in their department. And we stand up in front of people and say self-service, 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 because we're getting them when they're still new to the firm.
Okay, we obviously have a lot of people here on the internal, with the internal perspective. And again, a question for Phil here. So what impact has your approach, so kind of increasingly being more forceful towards driving people down that self-service route, what impact has that had on customer satisfaction? I see there's a second part of this question also saying, also for VIPs logging tickets, you know, the ones that like to flout all the rules and it applies to everyone else but not me. So first of all, customer satisfaction and then VIPs. So how's that going?
I think the customer satisfaction in general is fine. Well, I mean, I don't think we claim it's massively improved satisfaction with IT over where we were before we introduced it, but it certainly hasn't had a negative effect. I think that's mainly down to the people who like using sort of self-service and are happy to use it are still happy, and those that don't will never be happy, even though they objectively we can measure a better level of service. That we're processing more incidents and service requests faster with fewer people. VIPs. We're a partnership. We're a partnership. We have our VIPs are our proprietary partners, and they're based all around the UK. Some of them do use self-service without complaint. Some of them get their PA to log calls on their behalf, and they use self-service without complaint. And some of them, you know, wander down and have a chat, and they're the few people we don't tell to bugger off and log a call.
Okay, fair enough. There'll always be a few. Okay, the other question here, obviously someone's asked the question you get asked at every one of these presentations, will the slides be available? Yes, we're actually recording this, so anyone who's registered for it will get the actual recording itself. So, quick question for Phil. So again, Phil, are you organizing your service desk staff? I think you kind of addressed this, but we might want to repeat it, into those that deal with incidents and those dealing with requests. Oh, that's a slightly different question.
No. We actually, possibly to annoy Hornbill, have created our own little view of in Supportworks where we have all calls, regardless of call class. And so we just deal with them on the basis of the service level, and so the team just takes from the pot.
Okay, fair enough. So again, just the question here is about, would you support the need to mandate self-service within an organization? So that's probably, as a matter of fact, I'd be interested with two perspectives on that, because you've got the internal perspective, so just basically saying, look, you've got to use this. So would you support from the internal? And then I'd like to get a view from Adam. What would you think from an external perspective?
Yes, I would. I mean, it's been of a great benefit to us. I mean, I think you have to be, you know, realistic and reasonable about this. That we will never get to 100% of all tickets raised through self-service, but we think 75% is pretty good for us, and we're comfortable with that level. And so, as long as we're maintaining that, I think we're happy with what we're achieving.
I think to add to that, from an external perspective, we will be the same. You're constantly looking to improve the adoption and the acceptance and the satisfaction with the service that you're providing. But the reality is you'll never ever get to 100%. And what you look to do is to provide potentially services or benefits for your user community, for your customers, that they maybe didn't realise were actually available via self-service.
Well, Adam, since you're still on there, I think the other, it doesn't mention who it's addressed to, but I think it's going to be our final question. If others come in, I'll try and answer it. But do you model your knowledge base on the different levels of users? So, for example, external customers, internal technical staff, etc. So do you model the knowledge base so they search in different areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we liked about the knowledge base is that it was controlled by the Supportworks client, but could be made visible to external customers. So We haven't done anything particularly clever in that aspect, but what we do is we use the catalog functionality within the Supportworks knowledge base to effectively have private areas that are only visible to internal staff versus the published areas that you can access fully through web self-service.
Okay, guys, we've got time for one final question, and this is actually directed at me. I should really get our service desk manager in here to answer this. in fact, I've got the perfect people to answer it sitting with me. What's our experience with our own self-service portal and the take-up by our own customers? So my experience seeing that is we get a huge number of requests. I haven't got the stats of our own self-service to hand. I'm sure a service desk manager would be happy to provide them to me. But we get a lot of customers checking in on updates, checking in on new versions, accessing all the release notes online, asking specific questions. What we do also see, and there's a huge increase over the last number of years, is actually customers driving to help themselves, so using the forum. So we'll get a lot of customers out there, and I think, Adam, you're a prolific user. I'm not sure if you are, Phil, but Adam's certainly a prolific user, where basically they see, has anyone done this report before? Does anyone know how to implement this process? And really, these guys are actually helping themselves out immediately before we even get a chance to open our mouths. But certainly, first of all, self-service, Adam. Second of all, the portal. Do you use both of them? Do you use them regularly?
Yeah, I mean, as Pat says, I do use the forum. Sadly enough, I tend to check it pretty much every day just to see what's going on. But you know, the concept of a user community and having customers exchange information is hugely powerful, and being able to persist that information is great. And I've just noticed recently on the Supportworks, the Hornbill forum, the FAQs that have actually been deemed as useful, appropriate, and contain great information have now been incorporated into their self-service offering. And that's kind of followed exactly what we wanted to achieve, which was get the articles, get the information that our customers wanted, and make them available to our customer base.
And in a spectacular display of hypocrisy, I have never used Hornbill's self-service. I still email my problems in. And I guess one of the reasons I do that is I know if I start typing Hornbill into an email client, I get the right address, and I can never remember my username and password to get into hornbill.com. I'm an occasional user of the forum, and it has been very, very helpful in the past.
All right, I'm going to have to seriously chastise Phil after that. So, right, I'm immediately going to get your rights to email our service desk revoked. When you walk out of the office today, you're going to go equipped with your login ID and password for both the forum and self-service.
I've got no end of password reminders stored in our email archive system. I just can't be bothered to trawl for them. It's definitely.
Okay, guys, listen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. It's nice to get some customers in to talk about real-life experiences, because we can sit there and preach. We do this stuff ourselves, but we can sit there and preach from the vendor's perspective, but it's nice to bring in a couple of people who really know what it's like to deploy this both for internal and external support. So I'll thank both Adam and Phil for appearing with us, and we hope to catch you online on another one of these events soon.